The attack came at night. Captain Thorne did not believe in coincidences. Not in war, not when lives hung on the edge of a blade. And especially not when the fate of humanity rested on a single, vulnerable asset, his daughter. The Raven's fury shook as the first missile hit. Alarms screamed, and emergency lights flooded the command deck. Thorne's fingers tightened around the console. He was still half asleep, but his instincts were awake, alive with the awareness that this wasn't just another raid. This was different. They'd known the aliens were coming. But not like this. Damage report! Thorne snapped, his voice cutting through the chaos. Shields down to 40%, Captain! Ensign Harper's voice was high with panic. Hull integrity compromised. We're taking on water! Not water, air, Thorne muttered, his gaze darting across the flickering displays. The cold rush of real fear seeped in. His mind raced. This wasn't a standard attack. They were targeting something. Someone. His daughter, Leah? Sir! Harper's voice broke his thoughts. Incoming transmission, encrypted. Patch it through. The image that appeared on the holographic screen wasn't from any of their allies. It was alien, unmistakably. A humanoid figure with dark green skin, armored in jagged, obsidian-colored plating. Its eyes glowed with a sickly yellow light. Captain Thorne? The voice was deep, almost a growl. You should have surrendered when you had the chance. Thorne's heart pounded. His mind screamed at him to react, to push back, but all he could focus on was the image of his daughter, helpless, in the clutches of an alien mercenary force. His daughter, taken. You have no idea who you've kidnapped. Thorne's voice was a low growl, barely contained. But you will. The alien's expression twisted into a cruel smile. I'm well aware. We wanted you, Captain. You and your special assets. But your precious daughter will suffice. She's the leverage we need to make sure you cooperate. And if you don't, well, it raised a hand. Let's just say she will be very useful. Thorne clenched his fists. You can have me. You can have anything you want. But you let her go, now? Now. The alien's smile widened. That's not how this works. Not anymore. Before Thorne could react, the transmission cut off, and the whole ship lurched violently to the side, another blast hitting the port side. His crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, but the damage was already done. The Raven's fury was fighting to stay afloat. Captain? Lieutenant Jacobs called from the navigation station. We've lost all propulsion. We're dead in the water. Thorne didn't need to hear that to know the situation was dire. He looked at the view screen, and all he saw was the dark emptiness of space, with the alien fleet closing in, sharp, angular ships with spiked exteriors and weapons primed. His blood ran cold. There were no more chances. This wasn't just a raid, it was a calculated strike against humanity's final line of defense. The aliens had come to claim Earth's most valuable asset, and it was a person. Leah Thorne. Status on the fleet? Thorne barked. Outmatched, Jacobs replied, his face pale. We've got 4 destroyers, but they're not in position. No backup in range. The alien mercenaries, they're too fast. Thorne stood, a heavy weight settling in his chest. The Raven's Fury had been the flagship of humanity's last stand, its final hope to take the fight to the invaders. But the tide of the war had shifted, and he could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. Then a voice, harsh, grim, cracked over the intercom. This is Admiral Cade of the Earth Defense Fleet, the voice said, unsteady but determined. The fleet is scattering, taking heavy fire. We've got one shot at this. Captain, you're the only one left with the firepower to pull this off. Thorne's mind flashed to his daughter. He saw her, her face, her laugh, the way she had looked at him before everything fell apart. He couldn't let them take her. Not again. Not after everything they'd fought for. Thorne didn't wait for the Admiral to finish. All hands to battle stations. Initiate full power to the engines. We're going in. Captain, wait! Harper shouted. We're still compromised. The Fury can't hold up. You've got a better plan, Ensign? Thorne's voice cut through the tension. No? Then trust me, we'll hold. Now move! The bridge erupted into action. Thorne's mind raced, running through all the strategies, the tactics he had learned in the decades of war. The aliens had underestimated humanity before. They had come with their overwhelming numbers, their superior tech. But humanity had always risen when the odds were stacked against them. Get us into formation with the Raven's fury! Thorne barked to Jacobs, already mapping out a desperate plan in his head. We're out of time! Jacobs protested. Then we make time, Thorne said through gritted teeth. Initiate evasive maneuvers. I'll give you the signal. He turned to Harper. Weapon systems. Get them online. We'll fight with everything we have. A chorus of acknowledgments rang through the bridge, and Thorne's mind turned to the mission at hand. He was not only captain now, he was humanity's last hope. They couldn't let the aliens get what they wanted. His daughter was humanity's final asset, and the enemies would learn that the hard way. Thorne's voice was steady as he said one final order before he stepped into action. Prepare to engage. As the Raven's fury lurched forward once more, Thorne's heart burned with fury. The enemy had made a fatal mistake. They had taken his daughter, and in doing so, they had awakened the full wrath of humanity. And humanity did not know how to lose. Not anymore. The Raven's fury lurched once again as another blast tore through its hull. Thorne's jaw clenched, but he didn't flinch. His mind was already running, calculating, shifting between possibilities. The alien mercenaries had made their move. Now, it was time for his. Shields holding at 15%. Harper's voice broke through the haze of alarms and the constant hum of emergency lighting. We can't keep this up for much longer, Captain. Thorne didn't need to hear it. He could feel the weight of their situation with every strained tremor of the ship. The Fury was on the brink. But it wasn't the ship that mattered anymore. It was the girl. His daughter. She had been taken, and the aliens knew it. They would use her as leverage, unless he made them understand that humanity would never bend. Harper, get us into position. We need to hit them hard, Thorne ordered, his voice cold and controlled, despite the pressure bearing down on him. Position? Harper hesitated, glancing up. We're outgunned. We don't have a chance if we. Do it. Thorne's command was final, unwavering. Harper's fingers flew over the console, and the ship pivoted, turning to face the incoming fire from the alien fleet. The Raven's fury was battered, but it still had teeth. And now, with no choice but to go all in, Thorne wasn't about to waste any of them. Lieutenant Jacobs! Thorne turned to the man working furiously at the helm. Keep us steady. Evasive maneuvers in 3 seconds. Jacobs nodded, his face grim. The tension in the bridge thickened as the crew prepared for the impossible. A direct assault. Against overwhelming odds. It was madness. But it was all they had. 3, 2, 1, now! Thorne shouted. The Raven's fury surged forward, engines roaring to life. The ship's massive guns flared to life, unleashing devastating volleys toward the closest enemy vessel. The shots tore into the alien ship's shields, sending sparks and debris into space. The alien ships retaliated immediately, firing in quick succession. The Fury rocked with the impact, alarms blaring once again as the shields faltered. Damage to port side! Hull breach in Section 5! Harper's voice was panicked, but it had no time to linger. We're losing power! Do not stop! Thorne roared, gripping the armrest of his seat as the ship twisted violently. He could see the enemy's ships, their sharp, jagged designs gleaming in the fading light of distant stars. Their overwhelming numbers threatened to swallow them whole. But Thorne didn't back down. His daughter's face was the only thing keeping him grounded. The next wave of shots came fast. A burst of energy cracked the Raven's Fury's rear shields, sending the ship into a wild spin. Thorne fought to maintain his focus, his thoughts racing between his daughter, the fate of the crew, and the only way out. Harper, weapons! Thorne demanded, voice low and lethal. We need everything we have, asterisk now star dot. Harper's hands moved like lightning, adjusting the controls. Primary weapons are offline. Auxiliary is our only option. Thorne's pulse quickened. Auxiliary weapons weren't enough to hold off this kind of force. But there was something else, a last resort, one he hated to use. But it was the only way they could turn the tide. Initiate the Aegis protocol, Thorne ordered, his voice calm, but the weight of it hung heavily in the air. Aegis protocol? Captain, you know what that. Harper started to protest, but Thorne cut her off. Asterisk do it star. We have no other choice. Harper hesitated for a moment, her fingers frozen over the console. Then, with a quick glance at Thorne, she activated the sequence. The entire ship shuddered as the auxiliary systems powered up, but it was too late. The enemy ships had closed the gap, and the Raven's Fury was now surrounded. A flash of light from the enemy fleet lit up the view screen, a reminder of the impending doom. But then, as the ship's energy reserves surged into overdrive, the Fury's engines roared to life with a final, terrifying burst. The massive ship lurched forward, catapulting into the heart of the enemy formation. Thorne didn't hesitate. Fire everything, he said with brutal calm. The auxiliary weapons fired, a rapid barrage of plasma bolts and missiles tearing into the closest alien ship. It wasn't precise. It was chaos. But it was exactly what they needed. The first enemy vessel erupted in a burst of flame and debris, and the next followed. The enemy ships scrambled, disoriented by the unexpected counterattack. Captain, the Aegis is holding, but it won't last long, Harper shouted over the roar of alarms. We've got one shot. Then let's make it count. Thorne's jaw tightened. He knew the stakes. This was their moment, their only chance to strike back. The alien mercenaries had underestimated humanity before. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Lieutenant Jacobs, get us to the lead ship, asterisk now asterisk. Thorne barked. Jacobs' hands flew over the controls, pulling the Raven's Fury into a high-speed arc, threading through the alien ships like a knife through butter. The ship rocked with each near miss, but Jacobs held steady, his face a mask of focus. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, its weapons primed for the final blow. We're almost there, Jacobs yelled. 5 seconds. Thorne's eyes locked onto the target. There was no hesitation. He could see the vulnerability in the massive ship's hull. The weak point. The only place they could deliver a lethal strike. He had to time this perfectly. Asterisk now, asterisk, Thorne shouted. Jacobs slammed the throttle forward, pushing the ship into a final, desperate lunge. The weapons systems fired. Plasma energy tore into the flagship's core, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze, the Fury suspended in the air as the alien ship's shields collapsed under the relentless fire. Then came the explosion. A flash brighter than 1,000 suns. The shockwave hit, throwing the Raven's Fury backward, its engines screaming against the blast. Thorne's vision went white, but he could still hear Harper's voice, barely audible through the chaos. Captain? We did it, we. But before she could finish, the comms cut off. The blast had knocked out their systems. Thorne's heart pounded in his chest. They had struck the enemy flagship, but now they were floating, drifting in the aftermath. Damn it, Thorne muttered, gripping the edge of the console. He knew it wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. The battle had only just begun. The Raven's Fury was dead in space. A drift of debris surrounded them, glowing fragments from the shattered enemy flagship still floating like burning remnants of a lost battle. The ship groaned, its systems sputtering to life in fits and starts. It wasn't just damaged, it was dying. But in the silence of space, Captain Thorne could hear the rapid thrum of his own pulse. His thoughts raced faster than the Fury could react. They had struck the enemy's heart, but the mercenaries were relentless. They had his daughter, and they were not going to stop until they had everything they wanted. Captain, I've got a read on the enemy, Jacobs called out, his voice tense. They're retreating. But not all of them. 2 ships are heading towards the edge of the system, the others are pulling back, regrouping. Thorne's eyes narrowed. They're regrouping? His hands clenched into fists. They've got something bigger planned. They know we've got no more teeth left to bite back. Shields are down, Harper added, her voice tinged with fatigue but sharp with urgency. Hull integrity is compromised at 40%. We can't survive another assault. Thorne stood up from the command chair, pacing the length of the bridge. Every nerve in his body was alive with adrenaline, the world around him flickering with the weight of what was happening. He had failed. His daughter was still out there, in the hands of merciless invaders, and no amount of firepower was going to change that unless he acted now. He looked at the viewscreen, empty space, the flickering light of the stars, and the faint outline of the alien ships. They were circling like vultures, waiting for him to make his next move. Admiral Cade, Thorne said, his voice steady as he reached for the comms. Status update. What's left of the fleet? There was a long pause before Cade's voice crackled through the line. Not much, Captain. We've got half our ships left, but the remaining fleet is scattered. I've got orders to pull back to the moon base. If you can hold them off for just a few more hours, we can make a coordinated stand. I'm not going anywhere, Thorne shot back, his eyes flashing with resolve. And neither are they. They've made a mistake, underestimating what they're up against. You're saying you're going to fight them alone? Cade's voice was incredulous, tinged with disbelief. I'm saying I'm going to finish this, Thorne replied. He disconnected the line before Cade could respond, his gaze returning to the viewport. The Fury was wounded, but it wasn't dead. And it would be the one thing that stood between the alien invaders and humanity's final defiance. Jacobs, get us moving, Thorne ordered. We're heading towards the largest cluster of enemy ships. We're going to bring the fight to them. You've got a plan? Jacobs asked, his brow furrowing. A plan is a luxury, Thorne replied with a grim smile. Right now, we need a diversion. Harper gave a short nod, already working on adjusting the weapons systems. Auxiliary power is up. Weapons are online. We've got one shot at this. Then let's make it count, Thorne said, his voice steely with determination. The Raven's Fury lurched into motion again, engines groaning as they tried to push the battered vessel forward. The alien ships hovered at the edge of the system, circling in a precise formation, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for him to make the first move. Are we within range? Thorne asked, his pulse steady but his focus razor-sharp. Almost, Harper replied, her fingers dancing over the controls. 1 more minute and we'll have them. But we have to make sure they don't see us coming. They're watching everything. Thorne glanced at the screen, the alien ships growing ever closer. Each one was a formidable force, more powerful, better equipped than any human ship they had. And yet they were still following the same predictable formation. They thought they were in control. But they hadn't counted on the last card Thorne had to play. Jacobs, prepare for a hard turn. We're about to enter the fray, Thorne said. He turned to Harper. Weapons, lock onto the lead ship. Take it down in one strike. Harper's hands were already moving with precision, locking onto the enemy target. She looked at Thorne, her eyes full of fear, but also something else. Something that matched his own. A readiness. A desire to do what had to be done. Locked, she said, her voice steady. We have enough power to do this, Captain. But this is our only shot. Then make it count, Thorne said, his heart heavy but resolute. Fire. The blast was so bright, so sudden, that it illuminated the bridge in blinding white light. The Raven's Fury rocked as the weapon systems discharged, a direct hit to the lead alien vessel. The ship shuddered violently, sparks flying from its core as it disintegrated into a fiery mass. The shockwaves sent ripples through space, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. We've got their attention now, Jacob said, his voice low. They're coming in hot. The remaining alien ships turned, weapons primed and firing in rapid succession. The Fury rocked again, the hull screaming with each impact. But they didn't back down. They couldn't. "Harper, hit them again!" Thorne roared, gripping the edge of his console. "This is our only chance!" She didn't need to be told twice. With precision, Harper fired again, a stream of concentrated plasma cutting through the cold expanse of space. This time, the second alien ship exploded in a brilliant burst of energy. The tide was shifting. The mercenaries were rattled now, distracted. Thorne had done what was needed. They had given the aliens something to fear. But the battle wasn't over yet. "Shields at 10%, Captain," Harper called out, her voice a tight strain. "We're not going to survive much longer at this rate." "Then we make them pay for every inch," Thorne said, his voice fierce. "We die on our terms. No one else." The Raven's fury surged forward again, meeting the remaining enemy ships head-on. There was no room for hesitation anymore. Thorne felt every second, every blast, every impact deep in his bones. This was the end of the line. He knew it, the crew knew it. But they would make it a fight worth remembering. And as the final blast hit, sending the last alien ship into a violent explosion, Thorne knew one thing for sure. They had fought. They had defied. And humanity would never go down without a fight.